Hello there. You're welcome. In the modern global economy, the US dollar has long been the undisputed king of currencies. For decades, it has served as the world's primary reserve currency, a medium of exchange for international trade, and a store of value for governments, central banks, and financial institutions. This dominance has given the United States significant economic and geopolitical advantages, allowing the country to borrow cheaply, maintain global economic influence, and exert considerable power over global financial systems. However, in recent years, that dominance has come under increasing challenge from several quarters. A growing number of countries are questioning the dollar's central role in international trade and finance, and alternatives are beginning to emerge. In this video, we'll explore how the dollar's dominance is being challenged, what factors are driving this shift, and what it means for the global economy. The dollar's dominance, a historical perspective. To understand why the dollar's dominance is being challenged today, it's essential to first understand how it came to be. The US dollar became the world's primary reserve currency after World War II, with the establishment of the Bretton Woods system in 1944. Under Bretton Woods, the US dollar was pegged to gold, and other currencies were pegged to the dollar. This created a system in which the US dollar was the anchor currency of the global economy. Over time, as the global economy grew and the need for more liquidity increased, the dollar became the currency of choice for international trade. Oil, the world's most traded commodity, became priced in dollars, further entrenching the currency's global dominance. This system of dollar dominance persisted through the decades, with the U.S. government benefiting from the ability to print the world's reserve currency, giving it unique economic privileges. However, in 1971, the U.S. abandoned the gold standard under President Richard Nixon, transitioning to a fiat currency system. Despite this shift, the dollar remained the central pillar of the global financial system. Central banks around the world held vast reserves of U.S. dollars, and most international transactions continued to be denominated in dollars. For much of the 20th and early 21st centuries, the dollar maintained its dominant position largely due to its stability, liquidity, and the strength of the U.S. economy. The U.S. also built an extensive network of military and political alliances, which ensured that countries were willing to accept and use the dollar in global trade. The forces challenging dollar dominance. While the dollar has enjoyed unparalleled dominance, several forces have emerged in recent years to challenge its position as the global reserve currency. These challenges come from both economic and geopolitical fronts and are primarily driven by the following factors. The rise of alternative currencies. One of the most significant challenges to the dollar comes from the rise of alternative currencies. China, the world's second largest economy, has been at the forefront of efforts to challenge the dollar's dominance. Over the past decade, China has been pushing for greater international use of its currency, the renminbi (RMB). In 2016, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) added the RMB to its basket of reserve currencies, officially recognizing it as one of the world's major currencies. China has also developed a number of mechanisms to facilitate the use of the RMB in global trade. One such initiative is the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which has promoted infrastructure development across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Many of these projects are conducted in RMB, further embedding China's currency into global trade. Additionally, China has worked to create alternative payment systems, such as the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPs, which operates as a competitor to the SWIFT network that is largely dominated by the dollar. By promoting the use of the RMB in international trade and financial transactions, China is positioning itself as a global alternative to the US dollar. Russia is also playing a role in challenging dollar dominance. In recent years, Russia has been actively seeking to reduce its dependence on the dollar by increasing its gold reserves and promoting the use of its own currency, the ruble, in international trade. Russia has entered into bilateral agreements with countries like China and India to conduct trade in local currencies rather than using the dollar as an intermediary. These moves are part of a broader strategy to decrease Russia's vulnerability to U.S. sanctions and to create a financial system less reliant on the dollar. Geopolitical tensions and the weaponization of the dollar. The US dollar's dominance has been a source of power for the US government. Through the use of economic sanctions, the US has been able to exert significant pressure on countries it deems to be threats to its national security. However, this power has also led to growing resentment among countries that find themselves subject to US sanctions. Countries like Iran, Venezuela, and North Korea, for example, have long faced restrictions on their access to global financial markets due to US sanctions. As a result, these countries have sought alternatives to the dollar to mitigate the impact of sanctions. In some cases, they have turned to gold or other commodities as a store of value. In other cases, they have entered into agreements with countries like Russia and China to settle transactions in non-dollar currencies. The weaponization of the dollar has also led to greater scrutiny of the U.S. financial system. Many countries, especially in the developing world, are wary of becoming too reliant on the dollar because of the potential for sanctions or other forms of economic coercion. As a result, there has been growing interest in diversifying away from the dollar and exploring alternatives that are less subject to U.S. influence. The role of cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. In addition to traditional state-backed currencies like the RMB and ruble, another challenge to the dollar comes from the rise of cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum have gained popularity in recent years as alternatives to traditional currencies, and some see them as a way to bypass the US dollar altogether. Cryptocurrencies offer several advantages, including decentralization, lower transaction costs, and the ability to conduct cross-border transactions without the need for intermediaries. As digital currencies become more mainstream, they could potentially serve as a viable alternative to the dollar, particularly for countries that are seeking to reduce their dependence on the U.S. financial system. Moreover, central banks around the world are exploring the possibility of issuing their own digital currencies. China, for example, has already begun testing a central bank digital currency, CBDC, the digital yuan, which is expected to play a significant role in China's efforts to internationalize its currency and challenge the dollar. If other countries follow suit and create their own digital currencies, the dollar's dominance could be further eroded. Economic shifts and the decline of U.S. power. Another factor contributing to the challenge to the dollar's dominance is the shifting economic balance of power. Over the past few decades, the U.S. economy has experienced significant challenges, including rising debt levels, trade imbalances, and slower growth compared to emerging markets like China and India. While the U.S. remains the largest economy in the world, the rise of other economic powers has led to a diversification of global financial activity. As countries like China, India, and others in the developing world continue to grow, they are seeking to reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar and establish alternative financial systems that reflect the changing balance of economic power. This trend is especially evident in the rise of regional trade agreements, many of which include provisions for conducting trade in local currencies rather than using the dollar as an intermediary. What does this mean for the global economy? The challenge to the dollar's dominance has significant implications for the global economy. If the dollar loses its status as the world's primary reserve currency, it could have far-reaching consequences for international trade, finance, and geopolitics. Impact on the U.S. economy. If the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency, the U.S. could face higher borrowing costs and reduced economic influence. The U.S. has been able to run large trade deficits and borrow at relatively low interest rates because of the dollar's global demand. If other currencies or digital assets gain prominence, the U.S. could lose some of these advantages, potentially leading to higher inflation, interest rates, and economic instability. Impact on global trade. The dollar's dominance has facilitated the smooth functioning of global trade. If the dollar is replaced by alternative currencies, the process of international transactions could become more complex. New systems for currency exchange and payment processing would need to be developed, which could lead to increased costs and delays in global trade. Additionally, the widespread adoption of alternative currencies could introduce greater volatility in exchange rates, making it harder for businesses to plan and execute cross-border transactions. The rise of a multipolar financial system. If the dollar's dominance wanes, we could see the emergence of a multipolar financial system, where several currencies and payment systems play a significant role in global trade. This could lead to greater competition among currencies, with countries and companies seeking to use the most stable and reliable currencies for their transactions. In this new system, the US dollar would no longer be the default choice for international transactions, and other currencies like the euro, yuan, and ruble could gain prominence. Conclusion: the US dollar's dominance is being increasingly challenged by the rise of alternative currencies, geopolitical tensions, and the development of digital currencies. While the dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency, the forces driving this shift could have profound implications for the global economy. As countries and businesses seek to reduce their dependence on the dollar, the future of the global financial system could become more complex and decentralized. Whether the dollar will maintain its dominance or whether alternatives will emerge to challenge its position remains to be seen, but the growing momentum of de-dollarization is a trend that cannot be ignored. Goodbye for now.